Hey everybody, today I am changing up my container planting. I'm switching from annuals over to perennials. And a lot of people wouldn't think of perennials in their containers. Usually we think of annuals because they're those flower powerhouses. They just bloom all season nonstop. Perennials are a little bit more slow and steady. They might have bloom cycles, but there are some situations where they can be really good options, especially if you're someone who you can't get out there and water and fertilize all the time. I found that with these perennial pots, we were watering them way less than we ever had to do any of the annuals. So really good option if like you have a cottage or a cabin or something and you can't get out there, you're not there every day of the week type of thing, or if you have a rental property and you have to kind of leave it for a little while or leave it with guests. Perennials are just nice and easy, low maintenance, and you don't have to be out there watering and fertilizing all the time. So what I'm going to do is plant up one for shade, one for sun, and I have a little extra insight because last year in the springtime we had planted up a whole bunch of these containers just to see how they do, and then we went and wanted to see how they'd winter over. And normally our perennials, we would like them to be, or they would prefer to be in the ground, but we wanted to just see, hey, what happens if we just leave them in a pot over the winter, how do they do? And so I have, I guess, our unofficial results, because this is definitely not a scientific kind of survey that we were doing. What we did is basically planted them, enjoyed them all season. Once they went dormant, we put them just on the north side of our pump house, which would be protected on one side from the pump house, and on the other side there was usually like a snowbank there. Other than that, we didn't do anything. This spring I did go out there. I was kind of late getting out there. They had already started to send up new leaves and things like that. And then I just cleaned off any dead stuff. That's all I did, and gave them fertilizer. So that would have been probably a month ago when I did that. And so now I have some idea of which ones in our area did well with like so low maintenance. Again, not scientific, but hey, I think for the home gardener, knowing what worked for us with no care might be some good insight. One of the plants that was probably the most successful in the pots throughout the whole season were definitely the echinacea, or also known as coneflowers. These things were stunning, and we had just put these little quart container echinacea in there, and they just grew huge. They bloomed all season right up until frost. They were amazing, so they looked fantastic. Unfortunately, they didn't make it through the winter. Now, that didn't surprise me because they are zone 4, and we're zone 5A, although we tend to get colder winters. This last winter was extremely mild, so I thought maybe more things would make it, but we didn't find that with the echinacea. And in general, we have a harder time wintering over echinacea, even in our nursery pots. And I think because in the springtime, they tend to get too wet and then they end up rotting a little bit. So they're a little trickier. The one I want to put in my container is this one called Artisan Soft Orange. Beautiful flower on it. Oh, and we had one called, what was it called? Sunseeker White Perfection. The flower on that was so beautiful. I wish I had it because that's the one I would have chosen, but absolutely beautiful. This one's the Powwow White. Really nice one on that too. Another plant that did great all summer long was the Rudbeckia, but most Rudbeckias are usually right around a zone 5 or higher, and so we didn't expect to see that one come through and make it through the winter, and it didn't. So that's not a surprise there. Let's see, what else did we have that was sun? I have a list, so I better look at my list. Had a hardy geranium. And I was surprised that didn't make it because those usually can make it through a lot, but it didn't do it. Coreopsis, again, most of those are zone 5 or they're a little more tender, so I didn't expect those to make it. Had a primrose as well, again, another zone 5. So the zone 5s didn't necessarily make it through zone 5. Now, it could be just the conditions specific to where we put them and what we planted them in, but ultimately, I'm just telling you which ones did well. And when it came to sun ones, the one plant that really was shining was this one right here. This is the salvia, and this is the actual plant that we had put in there. And this is coming to the end of its bloom. You should have seen it a week ago. The thing was just glowing with these blue flowers. And generally with salvia, what we'll do is once it finishes blooming, we're just going to cut it back and tidy it up a little bit. Interesting thing though was that during the year, it wasn't quite as showy. It didn't quite get as big as this, and it bloomed for a little while, then it was done, and then it got overtaken by this Shasta daisy. This is the Alaska, and the daisy did make it. Some daisies are a little less hardy than this Alaska one, so this one made it. Right now, this one looks a little wimpy, but last year it was absolutely huge. It overtook almost the whole pot once the salvia was done blooming. And we also had it with a little bit of lamb's ear. Let's see where the lamb's ear go. It's still here. Where are you? it's little right now. Oh, right here. So there is some lamb's ear in here, and that came back. The only thing with lamb's ear in a container and even in our yard is that when it grows one year, it grows here, and then it usually doesn't grow in that exact same spot. It usually sends out some side shoots. So sometimes you can end up with a little bit of a hole with that one. But so far, this is coming back pretty nice. I think what's going to happen is once the salvia is done and we cut it back, we'll be waiting for it to rebloom, and then that's when those other two hopefully will take off. However, at some point, they're going to run out of room in this pot, and they're going to prefer to be out, in the ground. But we're going to just keep testing it and see how long we can go. Another one that did well was this. It's a woodland phlox, and it's called Sherwood Purple or Sherwood Blue or something like that. And this, I think they listed it as a zone 6. We weren't supposed to get this, but we did somehow. This one did absolutely fine, and it looks pretty nice. It's a little clumsy, like it's not perfectly even or anything. Oops, I'm catching it up there, but did pretty well. And we have it with some ajuga, and they've kind of integrated it quite a bit, so it's hard to tell the two. The ajuga, also known as bugleweed, that does really well. I kind of figured that would be okay, so I'm happy to see that. And another one we did was a perennial alyssum, and we don't usually have a perennial alyssum, but this one is called Golden Spring, and unfortunately it's being overwatered right now, and this pot is very heavy. This is actually a very xeric plant. Xeric means it likes it really dry, prefers it hot, but it's doing very well. It looked beautiful last year. It did fill out this pot really nicely, and the flowers last a really long time, but I think because, whoa, this is really heavy, so we are definitely overwatering. We need to just keep this in the no water zone for a while, and it'll definitely start to grow a lot more. So I love this plant. This one is one that really surprised me. So those were the sun ones. So the other plants that I want to put in sun, I am going to use a heuchera. And with heucheras, there's some heucheras that can take full sun, some that can take full shade, and some that can do either or. So you want to check your tags. And I'm going to use this one here. This is the Primo Black Pearl. It's from Proven Winners. It's a stunning plant. Has this nice dark glossy black leaf, nice flowers on it as well. So also known as a corabelle. Hummingbirds love it. The pollinators love it. So, and it looks great in a pot. And my favorite pot last year for shade had this and a really nice hosta in it. And I will say the heucheras made it back. However, I'm going to show you what those look like. Let me pull this out. So this is the one from last year, and you can see the hosta's doing really well, but this Primo Black Pearl not doing quite as well. And here's another one right here. You can see the leaves are a lot smaller. They don't have that lushness or the blackness. And at first I think oh, it just doesn't like competing in this pot, but I think it has to do with the amount of water in these. They're just getting too much water. Hostas generally can handle a lot of water. The heucheras, they don't like it to be that wet. And so we've got to be careful with these. And like I said, these plants, we're watering them as if they're our annual pots, and we've got to retrain our brains to say, no, these are the perennial ones. They do not need water. We need to just check them every couple days. And even then, we probably don't need them. So that's a good one. I have another one. Let me show you. This is another shade one, and it has two hostas in it. So the middle one with the big leaf is, I think, Drinking Gourd. I don't remember the name of the other one. I can look it up. And then this one with the squigglies, that's Curly Fries. I love that one. And this one also has a pulmonaria in it. Now the pulmonaria looked absolutely stunning last year, but this year it's looking a little wimpy in here. Again, probably a watering issue more than anything. So hopefully if we let these dry down a bit, we might have a little better luck and the plants might do a little better. So we're kind of learning these lessons as we go. And part of it is we've just been ignoring them. So we're just watering them, making sure they get a little bit of water every day, and we shouldn't be doing that. But hey, that's how it goes. So let me tell you about some other plants. I have also got, here, love the flower on this Virginia. This one, I think is called Miss Piggy. Yeah. And Virginia is an interesting plant because the flower is always really beautiful, lasts a really long time, has these really cool, leathery, waxy leaves. Very interesting plant. Unfortunately, the flower, once it's done, the leaves are interesting enough, but it might not be something that you're going to really want in your containers. I have a little bigger one in here. It's also called pig squeak, and that's because if you take the leaves and you rub your fingers on them, I don't know if you can hear that. It's kind of a funny pig squeak kind of sound. So that's how it gets its name. I have a couple other corabelles or heucheras in here. And you can see, this one is called Forever Red. This one I think is Lemon something, or, so they come in so many colors. I love some of the orange and burgundy and the kind of more rusty colored ones. This one here is a heucherella. And a lot of times you can tell a heucherella because the leaves are more lobed, and those tend to have a more of a cascade to them. So those can be nice in a hanging basket because they will kind of run down the side. Regular heucheras do that as well, but these definitely have much more of a cascading action. The flowers, like on this one, are a little smaller than what we see on the corbels, but they're beautiful nonetheless. And then you can see how much variation there is in the hostas. So like some of them are more like this blue leaf one here, beautiful variegated ones. This one here, nice lime color, and this one has a real narrow leaf. And then there's a lot of them that have those squiggly leaves. I have to say, I am a fan of the squiggly leaf hostas. And then there's also these micro ones and things like that. Another one that didn't do well for us for shade was the Brunera, and I love the leaves on these. They are a little sandpapery. Good thing is deer don't like them, but they didn't make it through the winter, and again, that could be a watering issue. That could be just they just didn't want to make it through for us. But Brunera looks beautiful in the container, and it held up really well. And there's different kinds. So like that one's real silvery. This one's more variegated. So it's a really nice addition. I love the contrast in it. And then here's another, I mentioned the pulmonaria that wasn't doing well in that pot. This is what they look like otherwise. And a lot of times they'll have a speckled leaf, really stunners. So these all do really well, but it ends up, it's the heucheras and the hostas and the salvia and this woodland phlox that did fantastic and really made it through for us. So if you're really thinking about keeping those things in containers for a longer period of time, like more than 1 year, that would be the way to do it. But remember, eventually they probably will peter out in a container. They would prefer to be in the landscape. So it is I would probably program myself as I'm planning it, like, okay, when I'm done at the end of the season, I'm gonna just stick them in the ground, and then next spring they'll kind of come to life. Or in the springtime, when I was cleaning them up, I could have tucked them in the ground, but they'll get more insulation if you plant them out. So anyway, I'm gonna get planting because I've got some different plants that I'm gonna try this year on these. So let me show you what I've got. So because I'm starting with bigger plants, I have a bigger container this year for this one. And so I am starting with that Primo Black Pearl heuchera. And wow, this plant is just something else. I really do love the leaf on it, and it looks great all season long. So it's just a really nice one, and it's just so different from some of the other ones. And then, like I mentioned, I want to do this Echinacea, the Artisan Soft Orange. Look at how beautiful I think that orange is going to be with that dark leaf. Just stunning. And so let's just pop this one. I'm going to just put it maybe right over here. So that looks nice. So we'll get that in there. And then the other plant that I'm using, this one is a new one for us. It is a Nepeta, or Nepeta, however you like to say it, catmint. And we didn't use that last year, so I don't know how it would have performed. I have a feeling it might do okay. We'll see. This variety is called Sylvester Blue, and I really like it because it's a little bit more compact. It gets like out to 2 feet tall and wide. And the ones that get over 2 feet tend to kind of flop in the middle. Sometimes, Nepeta can do that. And this is another one like the salvia, where once it's done blooming, we'll cut it back, we'll get a rebloom. Usually we get 3 blooms out of it, maybe even 4, depending on the seasons. So, this is one that you get a lot of mileage out of and a lot of color. It just kind of comes and goes throughout the season. So now I got to just get this one out. There we go. And then pop that one in here. So, wow, these are actually pretty tight in here. So this is a little tighter than I normally go, but I think they're at a pretty close to their full size anyway. So, I mean, they do get a little bigger than this, but I'm not too worried about them. And hey, the plan, especially with that Echinacea, I'm gonna wanna get that in the ground this fall, simply because I have a feeling it wouldn't make it in this pot. So, oops, lost a little bit, no big deal. So get that in there. And so, you know what I'll do? I'll add the soil in later, so I won't make you watch that. But I mean, I think this is gonna be beautiful. I love right now how the blue looks with the black. I love how the orange looks with the blue. And I mean, it's just 3 colors that kind of just are working really well together. So I'm looking forward to kind of following this one. Oh, I kind of beat this thing up as I was putting it in there, but that's gonna be okay because it's just gonna send up more blooms. But this is gonna be beautiful. Now I'm gonna work on that shade container. So for my shade container, I'm going to use this container here. It's a little bit small, but shade plants tend to grow a little slower anyway. I did drill the extra holes in this one just to make sure that I, was giving myself the best chance of success, because we did have the, we're having that little bit of trouble with the extra water and moisture in there, and we just got to reprogram ourselves. Don't water these like we do annuals. So let's just see. First one I'm going to put in here is this heuchera. It's Forever Red. I'd mentioned it. It's just got such a beautiful color, nice flower, but even if it didn't have the flower on it, I would absolutely love it because it's just got such an intense red to it, and that sticks around all season long. So it's a nice one for that. And then I'm putting it with a hosta. This hosta is Shadowland Wee, and it's called Wee because look at those little roller coaster leaves on it. I just really like the squiggly leaves ones. And this one has that little bit of little lighter color around the edge. I think that's really beautiful. And so I think it's just kind of a nice addition in here, nice texture to add. So I'm going to pop that in there. And just want to avoid getting it on top of there. So I think that's probably pretty good. Let's see, there seems to be like a natural little opening here, so I'll just tuck it on here just because I am putting them pretty tight. You can see it has a nice lavender flower as well, and the hummingbirds are big fans of the hosta flowers, so it's always fun to watch the hummingbirds flutter around. And then my big chest plant here is going to be this fern. This is a ghost fern, and why I picked it really has to do with the stem color. It's got a nice kind of red color stem. I think it pulls so beautifully for the Forever Red. I think this is going to be a fantastic combination. I think this is something to think about even for your yard and that type of thing, because I think this is really quite extraordinary when I see them together. And that fern adds a completely different texture as well. I better put a little more soil down at the bottom. Sorry, I don't mean to I shouldn't grab my fern quite like that. That was kind of manhandling it a bit. But just look at this texture with this one here is really beautiful. I'm going to maybe move this over just a little bit. That's as far as it's going to go. But fern, beautiful. Now, ferns can be a little tricky in overwintering, especially because they're usually late to come out. And then a lot of times we overwater it at that time, and then they can be a little sluggish. So might be a little tricky to overwinter this one. So that might be one that I want to plant out before the season ends. But then the heuchera and the hostas did fantastic for us. We didn't lose any of those last year. So it's kind of nice to see those in there. So again, these plants do prefer to be in the ground, but hey, they're going to do great in containers. Just have to remind myself, less water, less fertilizer. I'm going to put a little bit of time release fertilizer in here now. I'm not going to do any more fertilizing with them for the rest of the season. Especially, I always say, like, once you get into August, especially at least here, after that first week in August, I don't fertilize anything because most things are starting to get ready to go into dormancy here by that point, because we can get frost mid-September. So you don't want them putting on lots of new growth at the end of August only to get hit with frost. You want to have them put that energy into getting ready for dormancy. So I don't do any fertilizing. Usually, the second week in August would be the very latest I would give anything fertilizer. Otherwise, it's like once we get to the end of July, I'm usually done with my fertilizing. So that's my little tip for the day. Hope you guys are thinking about maybe some perennial pots just to see how they do and just to see if they are a lot lower maintenance for you. And I'm curious, if you have done some perennials in pots, tell me about it down in the comments. Which ones have worked for you? Which ones maybe haven't? Have you wintered them over would be the other question too. And have they done well, and how long have they lasted? I wouldn't expect them to be around for more than 3 years. I think 2 years is even pushing it, just because they prefer to be in the ground. But I also have heard of people saying, I've had a hosta in a pot for the last 10 years and it's doing just fine. So hey, whatever works, right? But I also don't want to plant plants and just for them to die. So I want to give them the best chance of living. So anyway, thanks for you guys for watching. I'll talk to you guys very, very soon.